They say that everyone has a book in them, so today I want to talk about mine, and this is it. I wrote this book back in 2017. Well, I published it in 2017, but it's been in the making for over 20 years, really. This man is a relative of mine. He was born in 1798 and died in 1874. He was born in Italy, and he spent a lot of his life working as a valet. In Italy back then, the Grand Tour was a big thing, and he came across all sorts of poets and writers, and he worked for them as a valet. And eventually in 1832 he came to England and settled here. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the details because I would much rather you bought the book. I made a very limited print run, and I still have some for sale, and it would be nice to sell a few because it's another one of my little mini income streams. If you're into history, if you're into genealogy, if you're into literature, then this could be the book for you, or a good gift for you to give somebody else. My relative Giovanni Battista Falsieri, he worked for some quite famous people of their time. So he worked for a poet called Matthew Gregory Lewis, who died quite young. He then worked for Lord Byron. He also worked for Mary Shelley, and he also worked for Benjamin Disraeli. And it was through Disraeli that he ended up living in England, where eventually he met his wife. And the rest of it I will leave to the book, because it's a twisty-turny story. It's really interesting. He led a really fascinating, interesting life, but was never that fussed about talking about it. So I've written his biography because it's the book that he should have written about himself and never did. But it's been enormous fun. I have been a genealogy nut for many years. When I was about 18, my aunt gave me some trinkets, some family heirlooms, and one of them was the memorial ring to Giovanni's wife, and that's how we found out about the Falsieri surname in the family, and went through some of the myths and stories that have been passed down through the family, and managed to research it back in the days before the internet was really a thing. I mean, now it's just so easy to research your family history. There are so many sites out there. I particularly use Ancestry, and it's not just him I've researched my whole family tree. My granddad was once the keeper of the family tree. He was the one that organised family reunions. He had the tree written down. He kept all sorts of things from the family, from both sides of the family, so from his side and from my grandmother's side. After he died, we found boxes and boxes of paperwork and photos and trinkets. We had photos going back to the 1850s and the 1860s. It was just incredible, and we've built up this extraordinary tree that I've been able to add to over the last 20 or 30 years through sites like Ancestry. I've got thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the tree now. It's just crazy. I've managed to touch base with all sorts of distant ancestors, and the reason I'm going on this car camping trip, I'm going up to the borders of Scotland, is because I want to do research into a particular part of my ancestry on my dad's side, and it is our border families. So I will talk about more of that as I do that car camping trip, because I'm going to be going to lots of kind of historical places connected with the family, some fascinating old graveyards. We're going to go and look at all sorts of bits and pieces, and I shall tell the stories as I go along. So ancestry, genealogy, the history of our family trees, it just fascinates me. And I'm not that interested in the famous people or the really, the ones with the big connections. It's the real people on the ground. You look at a census return, you see a family, and you see them every 10 years and how that family changes. I mean, I've been to all sorts of, tiny little hamlets and little villages and little houses that my ancestors have lived in. And just to stand somewhere, or even just in a church where people were baptised, married, and where they died, is just incredible to me. I don't know why it should be so incredible, because people live their lives and then they die, and they're going to do it somewhere. But that reality that you might be standing somewhere where your relative lived their whole lives and brought up their families, and maybe it's quite weird that my obsession with genealogy and building family trees, and yet I never had any interest in having children of my own. I don't really know why, I'm just not wired that way. But my brother has bravely taken on that mantle. He's married with 3 fairly young children. So the tree carries on, and I have to hope that one of my brother's 3 children will carry on where I leave off, because at the moment my dad is the keeper of the family heirlooms, and we have so much, and at some point this is going to come to me, and I am going to be the keeper of all those things. And I'm talking all sorts of things. It's not just the tree, it's all the inherited items that have come down. We have war medals, we have stacks of photographs, lots of furniture, lots of documentation. It's just so much, it's overwhelming, and it's a little bit worrying, because it will come to me and I need to be able to look after that properly. If I got my dream of living in a camper van and keeping all my business in storage and living a really tiny life, that isn't going to work when you have family heirlooms. And it's conversations that we do have as a family, what's going to happen to everything. So that's a bit of a burden, and that is a thing that I worry about, is that I need to take on those things. And in some ways it's great to have all that stuff, all those memories, all those historical things that come down from the family. On the other hand, it's also a horrible emotional burden, because you feel so responsible for it, and it means that you can't live the life you want to, because you have to look after these things. And that's fine if you're settled into a house like my parents are, and the stuff has just moved in, it's been collated and it stays there. But at some point I am going to have to be picking through the 50, 60, 70 years worth of history in my parents' house, and decide what's going to happen to things. And I try not to think about it too deeply, because at some point it's going to happen, and when it happens it will happen. But it does cross my mind on a reasonably regular basis. So anyway, if you're interested in history type stuff, here he is, my little family hero, my little family famous story. And I will put a link in the description so where you can go and buy it. I used to run a genealogy based blog, which still exists, but I don't really update it anymore, because although I dip into genealogy on a regular basis, I'm always dipping in and updating things. I haven't done any big projects for a while, but the site is still live, and that's still where you can link to where you can buy the book. So it would be great if you can. It is only a print copy, I don't have it on digital, I don't have it as an ebook, so if you want to read it, you're going to have to buy a physical book. I love physical books. It does have pictures. Look, there are historical pictures in there which no one's ever seen because they come from the family archive. I have some chunks, and I spent huge amounts of time researching this. I went to lots of fascinating archives like the Bodleian Library and the British Library, and I so enjoyed writing this book because I loved doing the research. I always wanted to be a writer. It was my second choice at the time behind costume design. Costume design has now become kind of like a low-level fashion designer, clothing designer. But this was my second choice. I really wanted to be a writer, which is why I have blogs and all that sort of thing, because I write every day. Writing is a thing that I do as well. It's just in me. And this was just the most joyous experience putting this together, the researching of it and the writing of it, because it was a project that I just loved so much, and it was so enjoyable and so rewarding to do, because people fascinate me. I am an introvert and not much of a socialite, I have to say, but people's lives fascinate me. The way they live their lives, the way their lives turn out, all that sort of thing. So that's a little vlog update that I've wanted to do for a while, just to tell you about the book that I had in me that I wrote. So I hope you enjoyed that. Do head on over and take a look. The blog has lots of other information about this, but it would be great if you could buy it. Thank you for watching.